Hi guys, I'm Lila and I have genetic hypothyroidism. I was diagnosed this February and also was diagnosed with atherosclerosis this summer. Today, I want to update you guys on what I've learned about my health and my next steps as a creator. What I've learned has definitely changed a lot of things. As you can see, I have a new model. I have a link to my debut VOD in the description and in the comment section of this video. I am zoomed in to my face for today's video so that I can still talk and be here, but I don't spoil the whole model. I want to give people a chance to see my debut first if they would like, but in future videos I'm going to be normal. For those who don't know, I was diagnosed and started getting treatment for hypothyroidism this February, so it's been 8 months now that I've been on hormone replacement therapy. Hypothyroidism is essentially an energy disorder. My body struggles to produce and manage energy due to low thyroid hormone production, which slows down the metabolism so much that entropy can accelerate faster than the body's defense and repair mechanisms. What that means is hypothyroidism reduces blood circulation, which limits oxygen, nutrient, and hormone delivery, and it also impairs waste removal and immune surveillance throughout the body, and that promotes inflammation, toxin accumulation, and tissue damage over time. This condition can be very dangerous if not treated early in life, and in my case, it kept getting misdiagnosed and misinterpreted and dismissed for decades. So I am one of those cases where thankfully it was caught just in time, but I was having symptoms of myxedema for years prior to starting VTubing, which is a serious life-threatening complication that can happen when you don't get treatment, and it can even put you into a coma. I am very lucky to still be here, and I had multiple organ impairment, body-wide inflammation, hypothermia, lots of symptoms, and sometimes things have to get very serious before things finally become obvious to your doctor. It was only caught because one of you figured out what it was, so I'm very grateful for that. When you've always had something this serious running in the background of your life, it's hard to know what is and isn't normal because you've never really had the opportunity to be normal. I had severe chronic fatigue and bodily numbness from such a young age that I didn't know what it felt like to not be tired or to not have a full functional range of emotions. There's a lot of emotions I've never felt before because, believe it or not, emotions require energy. And the more intense an emotion is, the more energy you need to produce it, which is a big reason why I have such a chill personality, because anger, for example, requires a lot of energy to produce, although it's a little more complicated than that, which I'll get into. This condition is why I've been on so many health hiatuses over the years, randomly losing function for who knows how long. It wasn't very predictable throughout my VTuber journey. And recovering from decades of undertreatment from something this serious can take a few years, but I've been recovering well. But as you might notice from the title, something has changed within me. Something is not the same. Wicked Part 2 in theaters November 21st. I've learned a lot during my time being on HRT. With a higher baseline of energy, I can feel new emotions I've never felt before. My processing speed and cognitive complexity has improved. I still have my struggles for sure, but things are generally much better. Ironically, the more you feel, though, the more you can suffer sometimes. Things you couldn't notice before become obvious, and what you couldn't find words to explain before can sometimes become easy to communicate. As my energy has improved, my body's deficits have become more pronounced. I have increased sensory sensitivity. Even with better energy, I've noticed there are these hard boundaries when it comes to executive functioning, processing, memory, stuff like that. And I couldn't help but wonder, is this just a physical thing? Is hypothyroidism really just like a metabolic disorder? Or can it actually be something that makes you neurodivergent? Because if I have gotten to a point where it's not easy to stay in the ideal range, but I'm in the vicinity of it more than ever, and I've even found what my limit is for how much medication I can have before I go into hyperthyroidism, but I still have symptoms, then that means it can't just be a hormone issue anymore. There has to be something else going on. And I did some research and found out, actually, that's true. Hypothyroidism can be both a physical disability and a mental one. Because in cases like mine, where the hypothyroidism is genetic and it wasn't treated in the first weeks and months of life, that actually causes an intellectual disability. Because if you don't have those essential thyroid hormones in your early stages of development, there's certain brain structures that never mature. And in fact, depending on the severity of your hypothyroidism, not only can you have this stunted development of the brain because of untreated hypothyroidism, but the longer it goes untreated throughout your life, the more damage you accumulate in the brain and body, the more brain damage you can accumulate on top of the intellectual disability you have from not having your genetic hypothyroidism treated as a baby. Me and my community have suspected for a long time I might be on the spectrum. I might have autism. That runs in my family. And for a long time, I thought maybe I had that. But as it turns out, intellectual disability caused by genetic hypothyroidism not being treated resembles autism very strongly in its presentation. In fact, it looks like autism so much that if you suspect you have both, and I do have characteristics of both, it's recommended you address the hypothyroidism first with hormone medication. Then you go to a neurologist, you get a brain scan so you can see what those structures look like. Because there is a structural difference between intellectual disability caused by hypothyroidism versus autism. And then you get your autism evaluation, because it's going to be very difficult for someone to be able to parse apart the symptoms if you don't have some kind of like physical evidence of what your brain looks like, and the hormones need to be, preferably in an ideal range. So that makes a lot of sense. Intellectual disability caused by genetic hypothyroidism not being treated causes a lot of symptoms that won't get better even if you do stabilize your hormones. Things like slower processing speed, impaired memory, impaired attention, focus, learning difficulties, issues with executive function, impaired emotional capacity, and social capacity. Depending on the severity of the intellectual disability, there may be certain emotions your brain cannot produce, or it just has a significantly impaired ability to produce it, and you can't feel them very intensely. Because think about it, if you do feel an intense emotion, well, that takes a lot of energy, not only to produce that emotion, but to sustain it. And if your energy is low enough, it doesn't make sense for your body to spend energy on that. It's not a very economical way to use the energy budget. When we looked at my most recent levels from this latest medication adjustment, my ENT remarked that I am a very atypical case. My system does not respond in a way he would expect it to. Not only do I fluctuate very quickly, but I fluctuate very widely, so there is no pattern my body is following. I have some kind of internal metabolic instability, and so at any given time, when my levels drop, my memory drops, my processing drops, focus and attention, ability to learn, my emotional capacity. In fact, I've noticed, and I don't know why I didn't notice this before, but when my energy levels get very low, I become partially or completely nonverbal because I don't have enough energy to speak. And in those moments, thinking is a lot harder. Simple things that most people do every day. Even just, believe it or not, just sending messages over Discord is a lot for me. Basic things people do every day take a lot more of my energy and processing power. Because think about it, every step of that process, from conceiving the idea of what I'm going to say to someone, to actually writing it, and then actually sending it, requires all these layers of resistance. I have to overcome them every time for every step of that process. And all of a sudden, so many things make sense. In fact, not only is my body fluctuating a lot on its own, but it's very reactive. So for example, right now, we're shifting between seasons. We're moving from, it's already fall now, but we shifted from summer to fall. A lot of people with hypothyroidism have a shift in symptoms around this time, because the metabolism does respond to things like light and temperature, for example. And for example, the colder it is, the harder that a body with hypothyroidism has to work to generate heat, so it can actually worsen your symptoms. For several years, I thought I just had seasonal affective disorder because I always started to feel miserable around August, September through the wintertime. Now I know what it is. And I've been having that, I think, for the past several weeks because I have been feeling really not great. In fact, it's a little cold today. I have a blanket on me right now, and just having a blanket actually stabilizes my system a lot more than you'd realize, because my body's just that sensitive. And so what I've learned from all of this is I can't expect consistency from myself, at least for now, because that's how volatile my system is. In fact, my ENT even said I am so atypical that like he's given me permission to adjust my own doses because I fluctuate so fast and so much. Thyroid hormone levels, they typically take 4 to 8 weeks of, you taking your medication every day for the medication to build in your system. And then that's when they take a blood test to see what your levels are. I fluctuate so much within that time. I'm always suffering between blood tests, waiting for the results. And like, if you fluctuate that often, I mean, the blood test still has value, but like, there's no like one number I'm trying to hit, because that number doesn't exist. The number is changing all the time. And that makes so much sense. I am so sensitive that like small amounts of air pollution really affect me. I have a really strict diet because I seem to have reactive hypoglycemia. And that's one of the reasons why I need to have a very, very specific diet, because my body does not tolerate simple carbs very well at all. It seems that I've reached the limits of what my ENT can do for me, so I'm going to be seeing an endocrinologist. Hopefully they can figure out what the nature of my metabolic instability is. It can be genetic. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but it can be other things, like, believe it or not, liver impairment can do that, among other things. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing a more expert and seeing a neurologist after the fact to confirm, what my brain structures look like. It's deeper than brain structures too. There's all these other parts of the brain, like your neurons and such, that get affected by not having that thyroid hormone early in your life. So that's why you're locked into those processing and learning and other limits. The probability of me not having that intellectual disability is incredibly low. I don't think it's really possible. I would have to be a biological anomaly. So I feel pretty confident in saying that for me, my hypothyroidism is not just a physical disability, but also an intellectual one. And now I understand why when I'm on stream, it's so hard for me to like chat and play a game at the same time. Like, that's probably just a feature of my disability. I don't know why my model's going crazy right now. Sorry about that. But yeah, I've been very, very exhausted, tired, sleeping twice a day at least for a while. I'm hoping that my endocrinologist can help me out. I don't know if this is something that's going to be able to be stabilized, but I really hope so, because the downside to them not being able to stabilize it, if it is genetic, is that if you keep swinging hormonally between hypo and hyperthyroidism, even if it's a temporary swing into one or the other state, that is causing some level of damage to your body. And so over a long enough period of time, those swings are going to continue to put stress on your brain, your heart, your bones, etc. All these really essential things. And that's not acceptable to me. I don't want to progressively lose function over time because of this. I'm really going to do everything that I can to get to the bottom of this. I did some research, and there are some startups and labs that are working on different treatments for hypothyroidism that they hope will be more effective. You guys might have heard of glucose patches. A lot of wealthier people with diabetes have them to monitor their blood sugar around the clock. And some sources are trying to work on that, but for people with hypothyroidism. It's a very, very difficult thing to measure something like hormone level, which is changing all the time. But that's something that I personally think would be really cool if it became available, because for cases like mine, the standard medical treatment of just giving me a fixed, dosage, it's just not effective. For me, it's not really a treatment because it's incomplete. It's an incomplete approach for my system. So I've been keeping my eyes on that, and I'm hopeful that either that or maybe gene editing in the next 10 years could help people like me. I would like to, in the future, start doing charity events for hypothyroidism. A lot of people have the condition and don't know it and get misdiagnosed as having depression or anxiety, sleep apnea, allergies, a whole bunch of other stuff, because hypothyroidism does cause other health conditions as symptoms. Most people don't think about depression, anxiety, etc. as symptoms of an underlying problem. like an underlying bigger health condition, but that's precisely how hypothyroidism works, and it's so sneaky and destructive. And as much as I'm a advocate for mental health, I think that a lot of the reason why people are suffering mentally and emotionally is because of their metabolic health. So I kind of think that it actually fits pretty well. I'm thinking of starting a charity campaign for the American Thyroid Association. They're actually the ones that made it standard to test babies for congenital hypothyroidism shortly after birth, the blood test, the preventative blood test. If my hospital gave it to me, obviously it didn't really help because I have the subclinical type of hypothyroidism. Subclinical is sneaky because your levels change. Sometimes you look normal with TSH levels, but all your other levels are not quite right. But a lot of doctors aren't trained to look for those other levels. So as long as your TSH looks normal, they just assume you're fine. Looks like that might have been the case for me. Quick aside, the PC campaign fund is just about $500 away from its goal. I'll leave a link in the description and comment section to that if you're interested in contributing. My computer is on its way out. It's been with me for about 3 years now. It is time. And I'll be able to run both my model and graphics heavy games with that new PC. I'm very excited. It's my first PC build. I'm very proud of myself. And I think I'll be able to do a better job with campaigns in the future with better tech like that. So as for future content, I'm going to start making videos. I'm going to work within my limits. You know, I'm going to start making it known when I stream and stuff like, hey, just so you know, I have these processing limitations. Like I have a physical and intellectual disability. It does cause volatility, and like here's what to expect from me. Here's what's realistic. And I'm going to, once again, restructure things. I mean, it's hard to create structure around something that's chaotic, right? Like that doesn't really exist, but I just want to do my best to continue to be able to make things. Because, oh, by the way, something cool I learned. Everything I do creatively actually helps to regulate my condition. I've said in the past that content creation for me isn't just like making things for fun. It really does help my mental health. That's actually true. So one of the features of intellectual disability caused by genetic hypothyroidism, here's a really good example of just how low energy severe hypothyroidism is, okay? Imagine this. For the average person, you have an experience, right? And then it triggers a certain emotion. You feel that emotion and you process the experience you just had through the expression of that emotion by feeling that emotion. And then after you feel the emotion, you've probably learned at least something, right? And then you go about your life. That's not how my brain works. My brain is so low energy that it cannot multitask like that. So I process things sequentially and differently. I have an experience. I feel an emotion. Again, it's probably a weak emotion, and it's not going to last very long because I don't have a lot of energy to support that process. Well, guess what? My energy is also so low. When I feel emotion, I don't typically process anything. For me, emotions are just a somatic stress response. What that means is emotion is energy, right? Emotion is kind of stress built up in the body. And for me, when I feel an emotion, I am only releasing stress. I'm not processing what happened. I am only releasing this energy that's built up in my system. After that, in order for me to process what happened to me, I need to use other parts of my brain to process that experience. So I don't use my emotional centers because they're not very strong. Instead, I'll journal, I'll do introspection, I will walk or exercise, I will make art. I use these logical, creative, and physical activity centers in my brain to do what most people do with their emotions. That's how low energy I am. And because of that, like when you think about that, no wonder I'm processing slower. If you feel an emotion and you're processing in real time and like learning within, minutes, maybe, I don't know, an hour? I can't guess something I've never experienced, so I'm just guessing. But for me, like, you know how long introspection takes? Like really quality introspection? It can take hours or days or weeks. That is a much longer timeline than the average person needs. I mean, I imagine in more like, if you have a more intense experience, maybe there's a difference there. Maybe we're more similar at that point. But the more emotional a situation is, the more intense the emotion expressed during the situation is, and the longer term that experience is, the longer it takes for me to process. Because the more energy it takes, and I have a smaller energy budget compared to the average person. And this is why I'm so logical. This is why I'm so adaptable. And I would argue fast-paced even with my energy limits. Like, I'm always doing different things. I've been told I'm very, like, disarming, you know? That makes sense, because that's the only kind of personality I can support. And I am what I can tolerate from other people, effectively. And there's still a possibility I could be autistic, but we have to rule out the hypothyroidism first. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. I've had a hard time these past few weeks with symptoms, but the more that time goes on, the more data I collect about my system and how to work around it, and I have faith. I have faith somehow, some way, I'll make it through. Because after all, for decades now, I have found a way without enough energy, without enough emotions, without the ability to communicate. And if you're that resilient, I mean, what can't you do, really? That's the silver lining to all of this for me. I'm like, oh my God, I've been through so much stuff. Like, this is crazy. This is why I'm so strategic. This is why I'm learning all the time. This is why I'm so curious, like, because I kind of have to be. I wouldn't have survived this long if I wasn't that robust. And so there is this greater appreciation for myself because of what I've learned. I still have a hard time doing some things. I struggle with things like being able to tell what I feel sometimes. And it is hard to have these, limitations. Sometimes I feel like I'm more of an observer of my life than a participant because I often feel like I'm not really in control. But at the same time, knowledge is power because knowledge gives us options. And so the more I learn, somehow the more hopeful I become that, hey, at least if I know I can work around things to the best of my ability. If any of my friends happen to be watching this, I just want you to know. Now that you know what you do, I really appreciate the people who reach out to me first. I really appreciate the people who are patient with me and who accept my limits. I've been keeping logs of my own personal data. Like, I track how many hours I sleep and how many hours of productivity I have per day and like how quickly my levels shift. And every 3 to 4 hours every day, my levels shift. So I wasn't surprised when my ENT told me, you have a very volatile system. And I really don't know if this helps at all because, like, I wish I could be more consistent with my friends and stuff. But I sort of hope that the little bit I do for me, like the little things I do are actually a lot. Even though they're probably teeny tiny to you. And when I make my future content, I want to make it with this in mind. There's certain things I want to be able to offer people, even though I have my limits. And so there's certain things I actually want to automate. Like, I want to have videos that are empowering and reassuring so that if people need it, they can go back to the video when they want to. And I can know that even if I'm really sick and tired and not okay, I can send a link, and in a way, I can still support that person, even though my body can't actually do it in that moment. Like, I've frozen this moment in time where I could, and I've automated it, and it's online forever, and it helps me feel like I can still be there for people, even though I have so many limitations. And I really don't know if they'll ever be resolved because I am a serious case, and the intellectual disability obviously isn't going to go away. Even with perfect hormones, there's some things I can't do in the way that most people do them. But I'm also okay with that too. Like, I've got to say, knowing what I've been through all this time with greater context, I just can't be hard on myself anymore. I mean, I've said that before, but like, every time I learn about how serious this is, I'm just like, holy crap. I'm like a supernatural being. This is crazy. I deserve my rest in a way. I feel like, if I am medically retired, I've earned it, I feel like suffering for decades, being able to rest for the rest of my life sounds like a pretty good reward for that. After suffering for so many decades in such a way that I couldn't even vocalize my suffering a lot of the time, or if I did, I was dismissed. And some people, they can be lazy or cowardly or passive or make excuses or avoid suffering. None of those things are privileges I ever had. I just had to keep going no matter what. For my own sake, because no one else understood. And I feel like someone like that, who's been strong for so long, deserves to not have to do that in a way for the rest of their life. And so if I do end up being like, and I'm pretty sure at this point, I'm like 99% sure, like I'm totally disabled, I deserve all of the like freedom that comes with that. Like not having to worry about stuff that most people have to worry about. You know, most people have to work until they're 65 to retire. I feel like I've earned my early retirement. Thank you very much. And for me, retirement doesn't mean not working either. I never understood people who were like, when I retire, I'm never going to do anything ever again. That sounds hella boring. If you do nothing for long enough, you will get depressed, I assure you. But for me, retirement is just being able to do what I want for the rest of my life. And I feel like I've sort of been given permission to do that because of this news. And that makes me feel better, even on the really hard days. Anyways, I am very, very tired. I had to re-record this video a few times because I am so tired right now, and I kept making mistakes. I hope I did a good job. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in a future video. Bye bye! Thank you for all your support. I love you.